This is Dirshu Mishnah Berurah concluding Siman Gimel from Sif Yud Gimel to the end of the Siman and beginning Siman Dalid. So we pick it up from Siman Gimel, Sif Yud Gimel, in which we're discussing the end of the halachas of going to the bathroom. Says the Machaber in Sif Yud Gimel, Lo Yashtin Me'uman, one should not urinate standing, Mimnei Nitzaitz is because of the droplets on Itazan Araglov that will sprinkle onto his feet. Now, of course, the similar akdama to what we said yesterday, these halachas are more relevant when one doesn't have a proper bathroom and one is urinating in the street and etc., etc. And therefore different concerns arise, whereas we're sitting with a toilet or urinal, you don't really have these issues. But says the Machaber, one should not urinate standing up. Why? The Mechaber doesn't say, but says the Mishnah Berurah, the reason is because it might go on your feet. What's the problem? Okay, you're getting your feet dirty. What's the problem? Says the Mishnah Berurah, the problem is Yomi cross shivcha. One might think you're a krav shivcha, which is someone who has an issue with their aver, with their member, and therefore the raglayim doesn't come out with a forceful stream, it sort of trickles out. It's a medical condition, it's an issue, so what's the difference? So maybe he has hthis problem. Says the Mishnah Berurah, ein mei raglayim mekalchin, the mei raglayim, the urine doesn't come out with a normal stream, ela shaisasin, it just sort of like spills out. And what's the problem? Ukavshicha einay mailit, a kavshicha can't have children. Chas v'shalom, rachman al-litzlan, v'yayimra abanav sheinin shalai, and one might come to say, and that's the issue. So don't use the bathroom in an area in which your feet can get dirty, because someone might suspect you have this medical condition that you can't have children, and you have children. People are going to think the kids are not yours, and therefore be careful when you urinate. Says the Mechaber, continuing, unless you're standing on a higher area, thereby that even if it trickles out, it's not going to get in your feet, or you're going to the bathroom in dirt, as we'll see in the next page. It means dirt that's plowed over, dirt that's soft, that the urine could get saturated and absorbed in. Says the Mishnah Berurah, let's say you don't have these eitzais, you can't do this, you're not in a high area, you don't have this soft earth, and you can't sit down. Says the Mishnah Berurah, as we turn over to the next Amud over here, what are you able to do? Says you can do a different eitzah. That's not going to come to nitzitis, that it won't come to trickle on your toes. Again, you don't have an higher area, you don't have soft dirt, you can't sit down. And we'll add, there's no urinal, there's no toilet, there's no issue. You have an issue, and now you're afraid that what's going to happen, and the way that you're urinating, the stream is going to get into your feet. Then what's the problem? Someone might suspect, God forbid, that you're a krav shivcha. Says the Mishnah Berurah, the eitzah say, yeah, but to aid yourself by picking up, like to pick up the testicles, which raises the stream a little bit, and thereby will miss your feet. Oil de matlis over, or to use a thicker cloth to pick up your aver. Let's say it happens. It could happen. Let's say someone's out in the wild and he has to use the bathroom and the urine gets on his feet. What should you do? Says Mishnah Berurah, mitzvah. You have a mitzvah to clean it off. Just going back to the top of this page, quoting the Ramah that says, explaining what Avar Tichluach was, Pirush Karka Sheina Besula, a non-virgin soil, which means Al-Gon Shel Eretz Charusha, a land that is plowed over. And we continue, Sif Yud Dalid, continuing in the similar vein. And the detail that we need to know about these halachas is it's going to be the extreme care and concern that one has to have with touching himself in his private areas, touching himself in his aver and his member. Why? Because it could cause him to be mitzi zera levatala, to spill his seed in vain, which is a terrible aver, like the Mishnah Berurah is going to quote from Even Ezer Siman Chav Gimel. And now we're going to have different areas that the halacha is going to dictate the care and concern that one has to have in order to prevent one from having a kishui, an erection, from prevent one from, God forbid, being mitzi zera levatala. So it says the Machaber and Sif Yadal Yizahir, you should be careful. Not to hold your amma, not to hold the member, v'yashtin, and to urinate. Imloi, where are you allowed to hold me'atoro lamata, the crown? It's actually called the corona in scientific terms. The top, the mushroom cap bar to lamata, and below, which means towards away from the body. So you're not supposed to hold the aver. Why not? Because it causes one to be mitzi shechvazera levatala. So you're allowed to hold the very end, you're not allowed to hold the aver. Elim came who not so unless you're a married man, and therefore we don't have such a concern. The Mishnah Berurah is going to speak out. Why not? Because the worst case scenario, he's going to come to kishur, he's going to come to an erection, but he has his wife, so it's no problem. But says the Mechaber, umidas chasidus lizara afilu anasi. The midas chasidus is to be careful Even a nasi, even one who is married, should be careful, and even he should not hold himself. Says the mechaber. Let's just take Gedalit and Tezvav together. If you need help, you need to aim a little bit. Even one who is not a nasi, what is he allowed to do? He is allowed to hold himself by his testicles. So let's go right now into Mishnah Berurah over here. Sifkat al-Chafei. So the first thing is, we said you're not allowed to hold yourself, you're not allowed to hold your member. What are you allowed to hold? The end, the tip. Says the Mishnah Berurah, let's say the Aver is Bekishoy. Let's say one has an erection. Still, Mutter Me'atar Lamata, still that is the area one is allowed to touch to aid himself using the bathroom. Says the Mishnah Berurah, continuing, in Sifkat al-Chavav, what's the problem? It could cause him to spill his seed in vain. By touching yourself, it causes one to be aroused, causes one to be warm, to hear her, and it brings one to lustful thoughts. And it could come to spilling his seed. The stringency of it, you shall look in Ayin Ebenezer Siman Chav Gimel. Says the Mishnah Berurah, but if you're Nasui, who Nasui Chav Zayin, so why is it more mutter? Says the Mishnah Berurah, Nasui is not allowed to spill his seed in vain just because he's married. What does that help you? Says the Mishnah Berurah, the classical example. He has bread in his basket, meaning he has a wife to go to. He doesn't have such a yitzhara because he's able to not spill his seed, but utilize his seed in the most appropriate manner with his wife. But, says the Mishnah Berurah, let's say she is a nidor, he's on a road, and therefore he's not with his wife. Also, then it is forbidden even if he is married. And just to point out, it's important to realize the Shartzian and Lamed Hey says this is going to machmer opinion of the Taz, the Magen Avram, the Birkei Yosef. The loikim mekilin, so it's just important to realize there are mekilim, there are those that hold that once one is married, it's always mutter. Continuing the Mishnah Berurah, even a married man, you shouldn't be touching yourself for no reason, unless you need the bathroom for no reason, you should not. Chavches, says the Mishnah Berurah, but what if someone is in a place that he's going to fall? What if someone is in a high area? For example, one of the Sfarim here brings down, he's on the edge of a roof, and therefore he's afraid that he's going to fall. So therefore, in such a scenario, he's in a precarious situation, and he has to use the bathroom. You don't have to start worrying also about how you're touching yourself. It's a terrible situation, so you'll have to just use the bathroom anyway possible. And furthermore, in that situation, we're not really worried you're going to come to arousal because you're more concerned that you're going to fall, and therefore we don't have any concern. Sifkat and Chavtas and Siftas Vav, the Mishnah Berurah continues, that you're allowed to hold yourself by your testicles. Why? Mishnah Berurah says it doesn't cause one to be aroused. And says Mishnah Berurah, there are times it's even allowed to hold the Amma, hold the member, using a thick cloth. Just to use a simple little cloth, your shirt, one should not hold himself that way. Says Mishmur, and there are those who want to even be machmir on a thick cloth. Why? We don't know what is thick and what is thin, so one should be as careful as possible. We'll just mimic the words of Sif Yudalit. You should be careful. Sif Tezvav says the Mechaber, Lo Hutar Linasi Lechus Ba'ama. We did not allow a married man to hold his Amma, only to urinate, but to scratch himself, there is no reason. Says the Mishnah Berurah, if Katan Lamid, why? Again, scratching yourself could cause one to be aroused, and easily one could come to spill his seed. They beg it off. Again, you could scratch yourself with a thick cloth. One is allowed to comb the hair down there. Be careful not to touch yourself. Be other with your hand. Again, because it causes one to have lustful thoughts. And ayin in bir halacha. Says in the Mishnah Berurah, Sifkat Yedzayin, he ends off with the halacha that we're really going to come back to later on in Shulchan Aruch. But says the Mechaber, Sif Yedzayin Amash Nekavav, someone who needs to use the bathroom. If you hold it in, over Mishum Bal Tishak, so you could be over because of you're becoming an abomination about the shaksu, you're not allowed to do that. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Sifkatan Lamed Aleph, V'mash Ma'atzah Leketanim. Let's say you just hold in urine, over misham about the shaksu, umisham shaloy elkar. You're over because about the shaksu and another iser. You should never hold it in. If you really need to use the bathroom, you should go. V'hamasha, says the Mishnah Berurah, Milafiach. If you hold in gas, you don't pass gas. Ain't over about the shaksu. It's not a problem. Gam iser about the shaksu nitcham they covered abriya, says the Mishnah Berurah. But because of covered abriya, we push away this iser. For example, kigoin hamashlan a cover. If you really have to use the bathroom, but you don't have a place to go. So just because you have to go, it doesn't mean you should start going in the middle of everything. So for that, we'll push away the iser about the shaksu of holding it in. And now the Mishnah Berurah continues. Actually, before he says Mishnah Berurah, just to point out the sin that's going to come up when we get to the latter Simanim when we discuss about the Shaksu. But about the Shaksu is a very high level. Actually, let's hold that thought. Dirshu is going to mention this in a minute. But says the Mishnah Berurah, continuing and concluding here, Sefkatan Lamed Aleph, finishing up the Siman, make sure to wipe yourself well. Because you have any excrement in its area on one's body, even a little bit is a problem, which causes him and and it's good to wash yourself properly with water or with spit in order to make sure that one is clean, so that he doesn't have any issues having any saya on his body. Let's go to the Dirshus, a bunch of Dirshus over here. Sif, number 15, when he discusses thick cloth, that's what you're allowed to hold yourself with. He says, but later on, some are even have an issue with the thick cloth, which we pointed out. In number 16, he goes to the last Mishnah Berurah that we just read about, Baltis Shaksu, says the Mishnah Berurah, now he gives you a little bit of a gather, and this is what I was speaking out. Well, sometimes you think Baltis Shaksu just means you have to go to the bathroom. It's not what it means. It means it's at the point it's coming out. Look what Dirshu writes over here in number 16. Let's say you don't have to really go so bad. And you need to go, but it's not so bad. And he says that's not about the shaksu. What's the gather? He quotes the Buchacha, the Ishla Avram from Buchacha, explains a very good gather, beautiful. That let's say you're Mesiach Taitu, you take your mind off it, then you won't have to go. That's not a problem. And that's the one thing we should take away from over here. Many things, but this particularly, that when it comes to about the shaksu, it means you're thinking about it cognizantly, it's mamish coming out. But if the moment you would say, think about something else, don't think about Niagara Falls, think about something else, then you won't have an issue. And all of a sudden, the feeling of using the bathroom will subside, that it's not Baal Tishaksu, and that's really, he quotes over here from the Stapler, very similar. And he says, what about saying Divrei Torah, Kriyishma Brachos, when you have to use the bathroom? When he quotes later on in Siman Sadi Beis, Katan Zayin, that if you could hold it in for up to a parcel, which is 72 minutes, then he says, I'm saying, even if afilu you could hold it in, and even though you don't really need to use it, excuse me, let me read that one more time. It says later on in Siman Sadi Beis, Sivkot and Zayin, we're in Dirshu Note 16. If you can't hold it in, that was a problem. If you can't hold it in 72 minutes, even if you don't need to go that badly, but you can't hold it in 72 minutes, then there is an isser of Baal Tishaksu. But let's say there's a bracha that you're going to miss the bracha, then you are allowed. And again, these are halachas that are going to come back to in Siman Sadi Beis. And then he quotes, if someone has an issue, someone has the diarrhea and the eats, so the doctors tell him it's to try to hold it in, then it's not a problem, it's allowed. That's Dirshu 17. Dirshu 18 says, that's a Chazon Ish discussing the two Isurim that were discussed with Lo Yiyakar. Let's leave that for a moment. Dirshu number 19, that he says it's Nilcha because covered Abrius. So Dirshu 19 quotes very simply, why? Because it's an Issa D'Rabbanan, and therefore, even for a little bit of a genai, we're going to allow to push away the Isser. And Kavod Abrias, he says, it goes by each person. So if this is a person that's going to be embarrassed or not going to be embarrassed. Another example, he says, let's say you're giving a Shia, or let's say you're Darshan Barabim, let's say you're dominating for the Amid, or cases like this, and you have to use the bathroom, then it's okay. You're allowed to hold it in. Again, because it's subjective in the person. Kavod Abrias is subjective. And now, The last thing that we're going to quote over here is, no, we're not going to quote anything. We're running out of time. We have to start Siman Dalet. The one thing we'll speak out outside is the last din that he spoke about, to make sure you wipe yourself well, to make sure there's no tsoy in your body and wash yourself, etc. Again, I saw the Sefer Piskei Tshuva, I spoke out so beautifully, but nowadays that you're using toilet paper and all these other things to clean yourself, we don't have such an issue, and therefore just make sure to clean yourself well. And now let's begin. Haskalah of Siman Dalet Dinei Netilas Yadayim 23 Sifim. Again, there's a lot that we have to say about Netilas Yadayim, and we're going to get there, but the one thing is, just be careful. Don't lump everything together. There's Netilas Yadayim, as we already started seeing in the morning. There's Netilas Yadayim after you use the bathroom, and then there's Netilas Yadayim before bread, and then there's Netilas Yadayim if you touch yourself in a covered area. 3 or 4 categories of Netilas Yadayim. We just have to be careful to learn each area very carefully. So let's just begin. They're Machaber and Sif Aleph. Yirchatz Yadav, you should wash your hand. V'yavarich al Netilas Yadayim. Very, very simple. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Sif Katan Hal. Yesh al zeh shnei taimim. A beautiful akdama of the Mishnah Berurah. Harash. Kasav, the Rosh, that's a Rishon. The Rosh says, why? You wash your hands, your hands are everywhere. And it's impossible that you didn't touch a dirty area in the middle of the night. You wash your hands, you make a bracha for Kriya Shema and Netila. Why, says the Rosh, and listen to the reason, because there will be practical ramifications. Says the Rav, because your hands are everywhere and you can end up touching yourself. Have a different reason. In the morning after you sleep, you're a new person. We saw that in the beginning by Moedani. You're a new person in the morning. So therefore, we have to thank Hashem that He created us. So to serve in Levarich Shemai, on this creation, the new creation, when we wake up in the morning, critical words when you wake up in the morning. We made all the brachas in the morning. Every morning. We made a takana until it's time in the morning to give ourselves holiness in the morning. Listen to these words, what we're doing every morning when we wash our hands. We're like a kohen, we're like a priest that is serving Hashem in Mekadesh Yadam and Akiyar. We're Keilu in the Beis HaMikdash washing hands before the wonderful service. That's every year, that's our entire life is serving God. Says the Mishnah Berurah. We go with both reasons, l'chomra, stringent, le'enyan netila, with regard to washing your hands. Let's say you forgot. One more Mishnah Berurah, if katan beis v'yavarich, right after you wash your hands. If you don't have to wait to dry your hands. If you don't even have to dry your hands at all. Some say the opposite. Make sure to dry your hands. Why? It's nothing to do again with washing your hands for bread. Different halacha. Here we're talking about washing your hands in the morning. Why should you wait to dry them? The ruach ra that's on your hands in the morning doesn't leave until you dry your hands. And you can't make a bracha if your hands are dirty. Says Mishnah Berurah, we don't paskin that way. Therefore, once you wash your hands, even if the water's still wet, you're allowed to make a bracha. You shouldn't touch your clothing until you wash your hands. Why not? Because you have tamei on your hands. You're going to make your clothing tamei. Gemara loy mashra kain. He says Gemara's not mash that way. Isa bebrachas dafnan aleph al titel chalucha shachas miyara shamish. Someone else shouldn't handle your clothing with tilbash. Why not? Misham saikana mazikin. Because again, his hands are tamei. Ella yitlu ba'atzvei. Pick up your clothing yourself. Makam shusham. Va'afilu oisa shamish kvar natal yadav. Even if the shamish, and this actually gives us a clue what's going on. Seemingly is not simply because the shamish didn't wash your hands. It says even if the shamish washes his hands, you shouldn't take the clothing from him. It sounds like some din of mazikin, of shadim. You should pick up your clothing yourself in the morning. I'm reading the Gemara, Rechitz on the bottom of the Raglav. B'chol yoyim, you should wash your hands, face, and feet every day. You're serving your Creator. You want to wash yourself up properly. In our days, we don't walk barefoot. You don't have to wash your feet. So many halachas, we're starting to get our feet wet, literally, no pun intended, with the halachas of washing your hands. Let's just see a little bit of Dirshu over here. Siman Dalet, note number 1, he says over here with regard to that you might have touched yourself. He says, what's an afkamina? You slept with gloves. So then you for sure didn't touch yourself. Says the Bir halacha later on that we're going to get to. According to the Rosh, you don't have to wash your hands, but you have to wash your hands. Why? Because of the ruach ra, the reason of the Rashba, and therefore, believe bracha, you will not make a bracha. Similarly, note number 2, if you know your hands are dirty, according to the Rosh, you have to make a bracha al tilas yadayim, even for other tefillos. This is what's brought later on. The Artz Chaim said this, but la halacha, no one should walk away before hearing shemish isis rachav legedolim ratzal spal. Use the bathroom, gedolim, you wipe yourself, and maybe you got your hands dirty. Even according to Roiv Paisim Chayiv Levarach Tilas Yadayim, still Ein losses mipzak Shulchan Aruch, says the Dirshu. Of course, we do not make a bracha of al tilas yadayim even if our hands are dirty. The only time you're going to make that bracha is once in the morning, and of course by bread, etc. And then the Dirshu number 3 over here quotes the Bir Halacha that we hold that both reasons are because of Beri Chadasha and as well because your hands are dirty. And finally, Shavli Yivarech Achar Tefillah, if you forgot to make your Al Tilas Yadayim, you do not make it after davening, and the Chayadim says, because davening is like a carbon and you already brought the carbon, so it's over. And finally, you don't have to wait to dry your hands, but he says, and what about after you use the bathroom, washing your hands? Note number 5, the Shartzian says, it's good to rub your hands before you make a bracha, because the Nikki is to make sure your hands are clean. And note number 6, that are you allowed to make a bracha? Are you allowed to learn Torah? And this is something that we said already that you're not supposed to, but if you have no choice, you're allowed to wipe off your hands properly, like the Pri Megadim said. The Pri Megadim says the opposite, but we already spoke out the halacha. There is an allowance to wipe off your hands, and we'll pick it up from over here. But again, to realize in the morning we have ruach ra, in the morning we have filth. When we touch ourselves, this filth before bread is a different inyan. Going to the bathroom is just filth and not ruach ra. Maybe there's a little bit of ruach ra that we'll discuss. And finally, let's just finish with note number 7. I'm sorry that it's late. What about putting on your kippah in the morning? You're putting in your yarmulke. Says Mezalmin, we're naik to do it. Your hands are tamei. We're still naik to put our kippah in the morning. We'll pick it up from here in the next year.